Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Paramahansa, Padurjikacharya, Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padurjikacharya, Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Krantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jai Mudiriyet Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha budreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke Bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 11th day of April 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We're in Canto 5, The Creative Impetus. Chapter 14, The Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. Text number 43. Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Surid Rajyam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Larasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajang Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasa Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajang Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajang Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha. Vinny. Yo Dustyajan Darasutan Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad Uttamashloka Lalasaha. Zoom land.
Yo Dustyajan Darasutan
Yo Dustyajan Darasutan
Shurid Rajam Vidisprashaha
Sudidrajam Vidisprashaha
Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad
Jahau Yuvaiva Malabad
Uttama Shloka Lalasa.
Uttama Larasaha. Yaha. The same Jada Bharata who was formerly Maharaj Bharat, the son of Maharaj Rishabhadev. Dustyajan, very difficult to give up. Dada Sutan, the wife and children, or the most opulent family life. Surit, friends and well-wishers. Rajyam, a kingdom that extended all over the world. Ridisprashaha, that which is situated within the core of one's heart. Jahau, he gave up. Yuva eva, even as a young man. Malavat, like stool. Uttama shloka lalasaha, who was so fond of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Uttama Shloka. Translation. While in the prime of life, the great Maharaj Bharat gave up everything because he was so fond of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Uttama Shloka. He gave up his beautiful wife, nice children, great friends, and an enormous empire. Although these things were very difficult to give up, Maharaj Bharat was so exalted that he gave them up just as one gives up stool after evacuating. Such was the greatness of his majesty. Purport. The name of God is Krishna because he is so attractive that for his sake the pure devotee can give up anything within this material world, even if very, very dear. Maharaj Bharat was an ideal king, instructor, and emperor of the world. He possessed all the opulences of the material world, but Krishna is so attractive that he attracted Maharaj Bharat from all his material possessions. Yet somehow or other, the king became affectionate to a little deer, and falling from his position, had to accept the body of a deer in his next life. Due to Krishna's great mercy upon him, he could not forget his position, and he could understand how he had fallen. Therefore, in the next life, as Jada Bharata, Maharaj Bharat was careful not to spoil his energy, and therefore he presented himself as a deaf and dumb person. In this way, he could concentrate on his devotional service. We have to learn from the great King Bharata how to become cautious in cultivating Krishna consciousness. A little inattention will retard our devotional service for the time being. Yet any service rendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never lost. Svapamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. A little devotional service rendered sincerely is a permanent asset. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17, I'll say, you say. Many of you have books or devices. Tyakva swadharmam chadanam bhujang harer bhajan napakpo tapate tato yadi yatra kvava bhadram abura mushyakim ko varta apto bhajatam swadharmataha. Somehow or other, if one is attracted to Krishna, whatever he does in devotional service is a permanent asset. Even if one falls down due to immaturity or bad association, his devotional assets are never lost. There are many examples of this. Ajamil, Maharaj Bharat, and many others. This Krishna consciousness movement is giving everyone a chance to engage in devotional service for at least some time. A little service will give one an impetus to advance and thus make one's life successful. In this verse, the Lord is described as Uttama Shloka. Uttama means the best, and Shloka means reputation. Lord Krishna is full in 6 opulences, one of which is reputation. Aishrayasya samagrasya viryasya yashasakshriya, Vishnu Purana 6.5.47. Krishna's reputation is still expanding. We are spreading the glories of Krishna by pushing forward this Krishna consciousness movement. Krishna's reputation, 5,000 years after the Battle of Kurukshetra, is still expanding throughout the world. Every important individual within this world must have heard of Krishna, especially at the present moment due to the Krishna consciousness movement. Even people who do not like us and want to suppress the movement are also somehow or other chanting Hare Krishna. They say, the Hare Krishna people should be chastised. Such foolish people do not realize the true value of this movement, but the mere fact that they want to criticize it gives them a chance to chant Hare Krishna, and this is its success. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, what should I do? I'll take advice. Should I went into my usual thing. Should I chant the Mangala Charan? Om Jnana? It's up to me. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahaganadagunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagandalalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Behevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sarigo Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right, 10 seconds for a pronunciation lesson. Believe it or not, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, all those I's at the end there are short because you're addressing her directly. In the vocative, it's not Gaurangi, Devi, like we normally say, which is no, but it's Gaurangi. So next time you can chant it that way. Okay, so this is a very ecstatic verse, and it's very much in the mood of Rishabdev and Jada Bharata, their heavy preaching. We just went through 2 chapters of Jada Bharata teaching Maharaj Rahugana about how this material world is not a place of real happiness, but is misery at every step. And then we had another chapter where Shukadev Goswami was unpacking the allegory further so that everyone could understand really. And it's all very heavy-duty instruction. And this is, in the mood of that, it's describing, even as a young man. Now, I seem to remember near the beginning of this whole series of chapters concerning Maharaj Bharat, that instead he was ruling for millions of years and then he renounced. Do you remember that? Yes. Anyway, we'll look it up. But it's amazing that even after all those millions of years, if that's indeed what it says, he was still a young man. That's the whole point here. Yuvaiva in his youth. So Dustyajan. Now, you know, anyone who's practicing Krishna consciousness realizes, well, I've got to give up this attachment, that attachment, if I really want to be serious. And it's 4 regular principles, all these things. Those who move into the ashram, it's a big step, you know. And so it's just Jajan. But really, what are we giving up? We're not giving up a kingdom of the whole world and a whole. I'm sure you had many, many wonderful, beautiful children and beautiful, probably wives and everything like that. Incredible renunciation. As a young man, oftentimes we'll read about great kings, such as Rishabdev himself, who gave up the kingdom, but after he had 100 sons. I mean, he had a long lifetime. And you get others, the Pandavas also. You know, of course, when they heard of the disappearance of Krishna, they started walking north. There's a technical word for it, I forgot what it is, Mahaprasthan, I think it is, where they just said, that's it. They took off their kingly garments and started walking. They didn't even wait for Draupadi and Kunti. I think, not Kunti. There were 2 of them. Draupadi was there. There was another lady there too. And Probably Bhadra, because Arjun had another wife, 2 more wives. Anyway, they didn't even wait for them, just started walking. Walking till they dropped. Can you imagine how, they had won the war, they had the king, they were ruling the world, but then when Krishna left, they said, that's it. They just started going. So this incredible detachment that's manifested in great devotees like this is central to the whole practice of Krishna consciousness, this principle of vairagya. Of being able, it's vairagya, but it's also manifested as tyaga. And it's important to understand this distinction of these two. Tyaga is literally renunciation, where you give something up or you refuse something that would otherwise be valuable, even though you may have an attachment for it. That's the whole idea of tyaga, is that you give it up, so that it doesn't distract you. But the attachment may still be there. But vairagya, you give it up or don't give it up, but the attachment is gone. That's the thing. That's where you had this incredible pastime of, what is his name? You know what I'm talking about. Premanidhi, what is it? Pundarik Vijayanidhi, who Gadadhar Pandit was advised to go learn, the intricacies of bhakti from him, and he went and saw it, and he said, he looked like a materialist. He's sitting there in wonderful silks. He's being fanned. You can imagine, putting individual grapes in his mouth, whatever. He looked like it was all prasadam, of course, like a materialist. And then I think it was Mukunda who was there, and he chanted one verse. I forget what verse it was, Bharapidam or something like that. What is it? Oh, that's right. Thank you. Aho baka supachato gari and yajigve vartate namatubhyam. Was it that one? Aho bakiyam. Aho bakiyam kalakala kutam. Jigangsi apya vidapya sadvi. Lebe gatim datritam katonyo kamvadayalam shadanam labeta. Which is a verse about Krishna's compassion and his incredible mercy. We can be somewhat compassionate. After all, we go out and we try to be kind to people. But if someone comes at us with a knife or with a gun, are you going to say, "That's okay"? After you disarm them, that's all right. Here, take this book. Please come to the temple. We'll be a little bit put off, right? Maybe this person shouldn't come to the temple. In other words, Bhutana tried to kill Krishna, Bakiyam. Was it the elder sister, I believe, of Bakasura? Yeah. And so Krishna, as you well know, is a little baby. What could be more vicious than that? He sucked out her life air along with her milk and killed her. But because she offered her breast to him, he said, okay, let me promote her, completely purified of all sinful reaction, and promote her to a position in Goloka Vrindavan as a wet nurse for Krishna, as Mother Yashoda's assistant. So Uddhava was amazed. How could there be anyone? That's where the aho comes in. Amazing. How merciful is Krishna? How forgiving. The ocean of compassion. Where am I going to go find someone more? The last line says, how can I go find someone more merciful than him? There's no one more merciful. So that verse suddenly transformed Pundarik Vijayanidhi, and he fell from his high perch. He was on some elevated position, fell down on the ground, on the floor, and started rolling around, tearing off his clothes, and went on for hours of his ecstatic symptom and love of Krishna, just appreciating that verse. So he had all this wealth, but he was detached from it, you see. And that's really what the gold standard is for devotees. Because we find there are some very wealthy devotees, kings like Ambarish, or very wealthy devotees like Ambarish Das, who is such a great hero in ISKCON. You may not know this, but when Prabhupada disappeared in 1977, there was the establishment of his samadhi, who was actually interred in Vrindavan. But there's also the Pushpa Samadhi in Mayapur. That's where you inter flowers that were then on. He was wearing a garland that were then offered to him, in his form. And I happened to be there when they interred those flowers. I was there right after Prabhupada disappeared. And then there was the question: well, how? Then we have to build the samadhis, right? And there was all this delay. because of Maya. It didn't go up right away. All efforts should have been put in that. So Ambarish stepped in and personally, I think it was $13 million to build that beautiful samadhi in Mayapur. You may have seen pictures. It looks very much like the Vatican, because the architect, the devotee architect, was Italian, and he was inspired by that. But and Prabhupada has been there for years, since early 80s, 84, 85, I think it was. So and then Ambarish is tens of millions to this TOVP. So he's putting his wealth to good use. So that's vairagya. That's vairagya, which is much more important than just giving up. Famously, we heard recently how Prabhupada, there's one picture of the Mayavadi, the famous Mayavadi, who's like saying no, he doesn't want to have any money, he's detached. Prabhupada said, give me the money, I'll bring it here, because it's all for Krishna. Famously, when he got that, we heard recently about the Detroit Center, Bhadrinarayan Swami was telling about. That was an incredible place, the nicest place in ISKCON at the time, materially. And Prabhupada was getting older. I think it was 76 when they got it, at the earliest. And he could have retired there. Said, oh, fine, this is fine, I'll stay here. And he didn't do that. He didn't stay in LA, which he was planning to do, or any of his wonderful places. He kept going. He kept moving because the devotees needed him, and he was drawn to keep preaching and because he was really detached. So this is shown by King Bharata, how he, at a young age, he gave up his wonderful wife and children here, suited, so touching to the heart, his kingdom, Riddhisprashaha. Asserted means his well-wishers and friends. He gave it and in his youth, which is important, just as one gives up stool after passing it. This is how detached he was. Because, as Prabhupada makes the point, he was so attached to Krishna. They're proportionate. See, devotees can show the most amazing tolerance and vairagya and compassion because of their absorption in Krishna, which Krishna means all attractive. So he actually attracts the devotee away from anything else, anything material. But the devotee practices yukta vairagya. Yukta vairagya, very important concept, which is defined by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anasaktasya vishayan yataham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchyate. So what does that mean? Anasaktasya, without attachment, vishayan, to the object of the senses, but employing them where appropriate in the service of Krishna. Just like wonderful food, so tasty food. There are restaurants in New York, you can sit down, you get up, you can owe them $1,000. Oh, I ate at such and such wonderful place. They give you a bottle of cognac that's $3,000. It's absurd. It's obscene. But devotees will say, okay, give me the cognac, we'll sell it, and buy new clothes for the deity. The point is that devotees know how to use things properly, employ in the service of Krishna. This is the whole art and process of devotional service, beginning with our own bodies and senses. This is our main asset. We have our life force, we have our intelligence, you have your words, you have all your activities that you can use. You may have some Lakshmi, whatever you can use. And so, because of the attraction to Krishna and the orders of the spiritual master, you employ these things, and you find it's freeing, because all these attachments weigh us down. How can I increase it, or how can I preserve it from being stolen? Now I have all this gold. How can I preserve it? That famous story of Sanatana Goswami, where when he took sannyas, he had this agent with him. He has his servant Ishan, who was very, very dutiful. And we're going on a long trip. We're going to go to Varanasi and try to see Lord Chaitanya. Go through the jungle. I'll bring some gold, so we may have, we may need it. So it's a long story, but eventually Sanatana told him that gold is like a death knell for us. People will kill us, and they were killed for it. There's a whole pastime for that. But he said, Ishan, take whatever remnants of gold you have left and go home. I don't need the gold. So then he's free. He's just a sannyasi. As the great sage Bob Dylan once, I think it was Bob Dylan, when you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. When you have nothing to steal, no one can take. So devotees feel, why? How can they do that? Because they feel full, they feel happy, they feel peaceful and fulfilled by their service to Krishna. The advanced devotees feel completely fulfilled, the most wealthy. The famous verse by about the Goswamis, Tuktva, is the same word as Tyaja and Tuktva, same thing. Tuktva turna mashesha mandala patishening sada tuchavat. The tuchavat is the same thing, the mullavad. Insignificant. Mullavad is more graphic, but it's the same thing. So, Ashesha Mandalapati, 3 of them, Rupa, Sanatan, and Raghunath Das, were inconceivably wealthy. I mean, Rupa Goswami had a whole gold, when he cashed out, so to speak, he had a whole boat full of gold. How much would that worth be today? 2 tons of gold. Imagine, billions. So he detached it, he used it in Krishna service. He gave half of it to the service of the Brahmins, Vaishnavas, quarter of it for his family who expected something. Prabhupada they expect him, don't cause a big. And a quarter of it for emergencies. In the emergency where the Sanatan was arrested, he was in the jail. And he utilized that. He cleverly bribed the Muslim jail keeper to let him go, gave him 10,000 pieces of gold, and off he went to join Lord Chaitanya in Varanasi. So that detachment is a symptom. What do we learn in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto? Such an important section. Talks about the supreme dharma being that which awakens real bhakti to adhokshaja, which is characterized a hoitaki and a prati. Has to be free of any mundane motive. The motive is simply to develop love for Krishna. You may not have that right now, but that's your motive. You're not going to God to pray to Him to relieve your disease or give me some money, I'm so poor. No. That's not bhakti. That's business. That's not bhakti. So it says right up front, ahoitaki. Ahoitaki means without cause, without material cause. And to fully satisfy the self, it has to be unmotivated. Uninterrupted. So those qualities are the gold standard. And you think, well, okay, what do we got? This religion, that religion. Is it all unmotivated? No. They're going to church, temple, mosque, whatever it is, to sometimes kill that enemy, or preserve this, or do this, give me this, I'm in trouble, whatever. Arto jigyasa arti. Krishna gives 4 reasons. The pious people go to, the demon atheists, they don't even go to God. They don't believe in God. But for those who are trying to develop pure bhakti, it has to be understood that it's not a business deal. You're trying to get in one sense, you're trying for the greatest value of anything that could ever be. And that is pure love for Krishna, untainted by any material motive. That's the absolute most valuable thing. It'll take you right back to Godhead, and you can be completely free from the 4 miseries, and the 7 miseries, if you want to count the, adhyatmic, adhibhadik, adhidaitic. That's a given. That's just a byproduct. But how could there be a greater valuable thing than something which gives you eternal life? Is that valuable? More valuable than like 60-year life, 40-year life? Full of unlimited, ever-increasing bliss and full knowledge. That has to be the most valuable thing. We're trying in our individual ways to try to maximize those things here, but it's pathetic. There's no eternal bliss, there's no eternal life, and there's just a whole ton of ignorance and suffering. I mean, it's clear from just living in this world for a few years. So, Maharaj Bharat gave all that up, and we know the story. So Prabhupada makes the point right at the beginning that he was able to, the name of God is Krishna because he's so attractive. So if we can develop our attraction for Krishna through the authorized process of bhakti as has been given to us, which is tried and true, if we take it up seriously and we practice carefully, we will develop that. Then the second verse in the series in chapter 2 of the 1st canto is Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Payojadeya Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayira Hoitikam. So just by beginning the practice, Vasudeva Bhakti Yoga Prayojata, engaging in this practice to Vasudeva Krishna, one quickly develops vairagya, detachment, and knowledge. They go together. Knowledge helps you to sustain the vairagya. We know we know that just letting the senses run riot and running after women in intoxication and everything is destructive of our bhakti. And we should also know it's also destructive of your life. It's not even, it's just suicide. So knowing that, but still, material side, there's some attraction there. So yeah, but I know it's poison. I know that, that I shouldn't do it. And so there's that intellectual strength that helps you to stay renounced. But it won't last, because the desire is always there. But if you use that knowledge, also knowledge of bhakti, to engage in Krishna consciousness, then you can really burn the seeds entirely, so that there's no more desire seed. Then what's the big deal? It's not like, oh, I got to grit my teeth. No, I shouldn't do it. Said, you come in contact with it. He said, you don't have an attraction. Hare Krishna, please take this book. Rather than you want to come on a date? No, please take this book. So anyway, that's the science of bhakti. And I wanted to share with you, also call your attention to the fact that, so Prabhupada makes the point here, a very important point, that the whole, one of the lessons, one of the many lessons of this whole section that we're completing now soon, is that we have to be very careful. We have to be vigilant to not let Maya sneak in and attract us. In the name of bhakti, I'm doing this. In the name of bhakti, I'm doing this. But soon you find yourself becoming, you're attracted and distracted. The attraction will distract you. And that is, distraction means you can't change your rounds nicely, you see. In other words, that's an offense. If you're not paying attention to the holy name, then you're obviously not getting the full benefit, although you're getting some benefit. So that you can get on thin ice and deviate and become, stop or decrease your devotional practice. So this is a lesson we learned from King Bharata, who was so strong. He gave up these, he gave up the wife and the children and the whole kingdom, but a little deer distracted him. And so his progress was delayed. It wasn't stopped. That's another important. None of it is lost. Prabhupada makes that point. He quotes 240, Svopama Visadharma Satai. Well, that first part of the verse, if I was editing this, I would include the first part, Nehabhikamanasati Pratyavaya on the Vidyate, which is really what a little devotional service rendered sincerely is a permanent asset. And a little bit can protect you from the most fearful type of danger, which is what? Bhakta soul. What's the great danger we face as human beings? To take birth again. No, if we don't go back to God, we're going to take birth again as human beings, but to lose the human form of life. That's and delays so long, you have to come up like that. So, I want to read something that caught my attention, and it's I hadn't read it before, although it's an old story, but it won't take long. This is a story entitled, it's written by Indradyumna Swami. It disappeared, it just appeared on Dandabats.com, although it's been on there for a few days. And it's called My Mother's Transformation. Has anyone read this before? This is, yeah. So this is, I'd never read this before. So I'm just going to read it. It's about the power, really, of Prabhupada's books, and the power of a great devotee like Indradyumna Swami to transform his mother. So here's what he says. It won't take long. I tried my best to help my own mother in spiritual life. Unfortunately, throughout most of her life, she never showed the slightest interest in religion. I once asked her if she believed in God, and she replied, something may be out there. Whenever I visited her, we would often debate the existence of the soul, life after death, karma, similar topics. So debate means she was on the other side. I don't believe any of that. Throughout the years, I continued cultivating that little something in her heart. She has maybe something there, by sending her Srila Prabhupada's books. And he would visit occasionally, and he would see, which invariably ended up in a pile at the back of her garage collecting grease and dust. He wasn't reading them. A few years ago, it doesn't give a date here, but this was written at least 10 years ago, probably more. A few years ago, she telephoned me late one night. It was an unusual hour to call, and I was surprised to hear from her. She began the conversation by asking if I would take her to Vrindavan, India. I was shocked. I thought, Mother wants to go to Vrindavan, the land of Krishna's birth. What is this? How does she even know what Vrindavan is? But she insisted and wanted to know when we could go. Although intrigued at the prospect of taking my mother to Vrindavan because it was late and I was very tired, I told her I'd call her back early the next morning and we could discuss the matter in detail. I woke up refreshed the next day, and after my shower, excitedly dialed her phone number. My brother answered. I said, Pete, can I speak to Mom? There was a prolonged silence, and I sensed something was wrong. Finally, his voice choked with emotion. He replied, Mom passed away last night. I was stunned. What happened? I asked. I talked to Mom only last night. I know, he said. She had been battling cancer for 6 months. She didn't want to tell you. Collecting myself, I said, Cancer? Did she say anything at the end? Yes, she did, he replied. She said, don't lament for me. I'm not this body. I'm eternal spirit soul. I'll never die. I'm going to Krishna. And with those words on her lips, she passed away. I couldn't believe it. My mother, the intellectual who never went to church, who never inquired about God, debated his very existence, was going to Krishna, was, quote, going to Krishna. I asked my brother, but how is it possible Mom said those things at death? He replied, when Mom learned she had cancer and was going to die, a strange transformation came over her. She became restless and unsettled. She began asking about you, wanting to know where you were and what you were doing. She had an intense desire to meet with you, to speak with you. But when I suggested calling you, she'd always say, no, don't bother him now. We'll contact him later. One morning, I went out to the garage to empty the garbage, and I found her going through all those books you had sent her during the past 25 years. She looked up at me and asked me to carry them into the house. That afternoon, she carefully dusted them off. For the last 5 months, she just sat in a rocking chair reading those books. Sometimes she'd underline a certain passage or quote that had particular relevance or importance to her. She also contacted your tape ministry in London and ordered all your lecture tapes, probably hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand. She listened to them on her headphones, rocking back and forth in her armchair, looking at your picture, which she kept on the table nearby. She must have listened to at least 3 a day. Gradually, her condition deteriorated, but she wasn't afraid. I think there was something in those books that made her fearless. Then last night, she sensed she was going to die. She told me to call you. Her last request was that you take her to a place called Vrindavan. I put the phone down and cried, not out of mundane sentiment or attachment, but in appreciation that my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, had extended his mercy to my mother and delivered her from material existence. I went home for the memorial service and arranged her estate. Just before I was leaving to return to Europe, my brother and sister approached me and asked what they should do with her ashes. Remembering my last conversation with her, that she desired to go to Vrindavan, I smiled and took the ashes with me. Several weeks later, one of my disciples placed them in the sacred waters of the Yamuna River in Vrindavan, India. I had fulfilled my mother's last request to me, a request that I pray will also be on my lips the day I leave this world. Now, there's a coda to this, which is not mentioned here. I remember when his mother passed away. I don't remember all this. It's just that there was a big inheritance. I think to remember it was at least $1 million. And he used that to start the whole Polish tour and the Woodstock, that's become famous, that tour of Europe. And, he told Harikesh Swami that he was going to do it, and Harikesh said, he's going to ask me to give him money from the BBT, but he didn't ask for a penny. He just wanted permission to do it and said, Harikesh, yeah, great, and since then, of course, he's been able to raise money through that. So that was the seed of course, he would have probably got the inheritance. I don't know if it was that much, but anyway. But there was just the whole transformation is incredible. The power of the books, the power of the preaching. And so I thought you'd enjoy that. Hare Krishna. You have a question?
Is there a mic?
You got the mic. Go ahead, use it. Close by.
I had a couple just quick thoughts, and I did have a question. Remember early on my time here, I was driving with the Moga, and
Please hold it close.
I was driving with the Moga, And I was just, well, what about this? Okay, well, what if I do that? Well, and I was like, where's Maya? What's the edge? And his answer every time was, don't give Maya an inch. And I'm trying to find, what about this? What about that? And it's just like so firm. So you kind of touched on that point.
Yes.
It helped me realize that.
That's the whole point of the deer and Bharata.
Govardhan told me a story when he was at a nursing home. He got kudos because when he made a phone call to a family member whose father had passed away, the way he just phrased it organically was, your father took his last breath at this time last night. And his supervisor thought that was a really nice way of sharing that statement. That kind of made me think of it because you got the phone call, your mother's passed away.
Yeah.
But Govardhan said it so nicely, very sweetly, that it was the people received it well. You know, your father took his last breath.
That's good.
One day, Vijay mustered the courage to bring me out to fail on Sankirtan and tolerate my horribleness. We were at Balboa Park, and Amoga said, hey, ask him about his story, how he came to Krishna consciousness. It's a good one. So he told it to me on the drive there. And there's this moment in the story that's very crucial where he gets all his money stolen from him. And he turned to me and he said, best thing that ever happened to me. And, I heard it, but I didn't believe it. He used the same tone when we picked the figs off the tree. And he was telling someone, best figs I've ever eaten. And he meant it. He said it with the same voice. Best thing that ever happened to me. I got my money stolen. So you helped me there realize why that's so, right? Because I couldn't get it back.
Yes,
You got all your money stolen from you? That's horrible. No, it helped him progress in Krishna consciousness at that crucial moment, him losing that money.
Well, the Shastra is so complete, especially Bhagavatam. So I like saying when I hear something like that, there's a verse for that.
Yeah.
Krishna says, Yasyaham anagunnami harishe taddanang shanai. He says, to those I show my real mercy, I take away their money. I take away their wealth. Because he says gradually, but it could sometimes be apparently not so gradual. And, Prabhupada identified this with this. He said that this is what happened with his business. Because his idea when he got initiated, he was a householder, he had children, more children on the way and everything. And it was predicted that he would become very wealthy, like Birla or something, So he said, okay, I'm going to use my money in Krishna's service. And of course, over the years, he did as much as possible do that, But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was coming to him in dreams and telling him to take sannyas, and he said, I was horrified. So, Prabhupada at various times in his preaching, that was 12 years when he was, worldwide preacher, he would mention that yes, that happened to me, kind of, that the business was ruined, there was a theft, and it didn't work out. And basically what happened is that he withdrew his interest in it because he was so interested in preaching, especially in Jhansi, all these developed. But he identified with that. And you can see a lot of devotees, have an incident like that, where some relationship was broken, that you were hanging on to, and you say, oh, that was the best thing. I felt so depressed, I went to the Hare Krishnas and had some prasadam, and this devotee preached to me, I got a little book, and like that. So that's what Krishna does. If he sees some sincerity, and he sees you're hanging on to this, hanging on to that, and he'll, make it more difficult.
I did have a question about a concept that you brought up, but I just wanted, there's an instruction you gave that applies to one of the devotees here, and I'll be unnamed because I don't want to put him on the spot, but he, just like Indra Swami and just like the person who helped build Prabhupada's Samadhi, is that he inherited some wealth. His parents worked very hard, and he got some wealth. And he said that his siblings went the cognac route with the wealth. Right? He's selling the cognac and using it in Krishna's service. Yeah. And actually, I think he's selling it to Neiman. That's true. Yeah.
Neiman Marcus?
Yeah, that we had from Balaram's story the other day, where he gave us that perfume that smelled just like cognac. Yeah. But so the question is uninterrupted. We're interrupting ourselves, right?
Yes.
There's a material side of us that's detached from all the bad decisions we made lives, and there's us, which is servant. So we're interrupting ourselves. Not that we're interrupting Krishna, right? Is that what uninterrupted means? Like, we're naturally servants of Krishna, but we're interrupting that service to ourselves?
Well, the mind. It's all in the mind. The mind is telling you to do something, and you're agreeing. Your determination to say no is not strong enough. No to the material mind, because our minds are not completely purified. There's a process. So when some desire comes, or when some temptation comes, because we're living in the material world, this is not the place one would originally, think of establishing a brahmacharya ashram. two blocks from a Southern California beach. I'm sorry, it's but still there's a brahmacharya ashram here, because by chanting and dancing, you can even go out on the beach and do Harinam and you can remain, detached. So, but still, if you let your mind wander or you whatever, you can say, whoa, and the question is what happens when the temptations come. And that's why this foundation of knowledge is so important. Reading the books, being regulated, and the central point, chanting good rounds, gives you the spiritual strength to say no to Maya and yes to Krishna. There's a chapter in that book, by the way, of Dharma, the Way of Transcendence, called No to Maya, Yes to Krishna, so the equivalent like that. It's a central principle. Go ahead.
Prabhu, we were discussing like devotees practice Yukta Vairagya, right? But it seems like Bharat Maharaj's case, it's like in contrast, because he was the king of the world and he could have helped in the Krishna consciousness propagation, like for all the citizens, but he instead chose to give up this and go for like a Nirjan Bhajan or so. How is that?
Well, there's two ways of doing it. In other words, there are some great souls, such as Ambarish, King Ambarish, as well as Ambarish Das, who, in the midst of great wealth, can still use it for Krishna's service, But then there's also a need, a crying need, for acharyas who can show the example, which is a standard example of giving up all these things and immersing themselves in the sannyas, detached road, and they can then be examples and preach, like that. So both of those are there in our tradition. There was King Prataparudra, who was a great devotee, and of Lord Chaitanya, and there's also the 6 Goswamis, who gave up all the wealth, and they had an assignment because they're great learned Brahmins, to write and to do what they did in Vrindavan, and both are remembered. But for us, because we need the teachings, we need the example. The Goswamis are more essential, than even King Prataparudra. But they're both, extremely high level of pure devotion. So it's both of those paths are possible. Vineet, you had something?
Prabhuji, I actually have 2 questions. First question was, as we see in the case of
Please speak a little louder.
In the case of Maharaj Bharat, he fell for a deer. And the reason
I'm sorry, he did what?
He fell.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
yes.
He became attracted to a deer because his heart was soft. And as one progresses in devotional service, one will naturally feel their heart becoming soft. And then the choice is to add Krishna. But circumstances, like all of a sudden he sees the deer when he was not expecting it, and that suddenly the softness of his heart, latches onto the deer. Yeah. So in this situation, when we are growing in our devotional service and our heart is becoming soft, how do we prevent, Maya from entering a soft heart? Because we can develop attachment very easily with the soft heart.
And as I mentioned when this subject came up before, when we were actually reading about the pastime, the problem with Bharat is that although he was so advanced, it was all on his own. He had, he didn't have someone to consult with. He wasn't there with his spiritual master or, sadhus who said, okay, save the deer, save the fawn, get her on the land, give her a little food, and then get out, leave. This is what sannyasis do. That's why they're traveling. That's one of the reasons they're traveling all the time. Because if you sit in one spot, it's easy to get attachments. If you're going all the time, a big attachment is to a home and facilities and all these different things. So that was the problem with Bharat, is that he naturally had to save this poor fawn. I mean, anyone would. But what comes after that? If we would do it here, okay, we save this poor cat. Well, you take him to the animal hospital and leave him off there. Then you go, You don't develop a whole relationship with this poor little kitten, or whatever it may be. That's where the problem comes. And that insight, because you may be bewildered, because there's so much reciprocation from this animal, this deer. So you have the senior devotees, the renunciants, the guru, saying, no, come with us, drag you away. And then you're saved. So he was alone. That was the problem. And he was still alone here with Maharaj Rahugana, but he learned his lesson. And he was not going to let that happen again. So that's the dynamic. That's why it's a society where we can help each other. We should never think that I'm a lone wolf and I can do it all myself, because it's impossible. So that's kirtan, sankirtan. We'll go to sankirtan. Chanting together is the Yuga Dharma. All right, I think we need to adjourn. Is that okay? Sorry.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, one more. Go ahead, Vijay.
Yes, very quickly, Prabhu. How would you substantiate that a deer remembering about his previous human form of life is a part of spiritual science and not material fiction?
Well, that's interesting, because I just read something that was fascinating. Years and years ago, when we wanted to write things in BTG that people could read, and they would think, oh, this is some empiric evidence for transmigration of the soul, which is a basic principle. And we went on Ian Stevenson. I mean, you may not have heard that name, but he actually corroborated little children, especially in India for some reason, but it happens elsewhere, who could say, oh, "You're not my mother. This is where I used to live," and and all kinds of things. And he corroborated. He would go to the place, and sure enough, there was a young lady who died, or untimely, and her name was this, and then he corroborated them. So just there's also the even more common phenomenon of near-death experiences, especially in the hospital where you're having a heart operation and the heart stops, and they're keeping you alive artificially, And so this, oftentimes someone will be able to tell. They say, yeah, I was outside of the body. I watched as Dr. So-and-so came in, and then Dr. So-and-so left, and they did this procedure. Really, And so this has been poo-pooed by doubters. It's some kind of hallucination in the brain, that you're going through this and seeing the light. And sometimes they think they see God or Jesus, whatever, But they said, no, they've confirmed that it's not hallucination, because they can see what's happening in the brain. They know what hallucination is, and they know what drugs do and all this. And it's not that. There's something going on there, because they don't know what it is. But we would say, yeah, this is a confirmation that the soul is not the body, and that it can live separately. And you always, everyone who leaves the body, that's why I like to say the first thing that happens when you die, he said, oh my God, I'm not dead, And then if you're very sinful, then it can become very horrific. So the idea is that there is. I'm sorry. The specific question again.
How is it possible for an animal like a deer to remember his previous life as a human being?
Yeah.
After all, he's an animal.
No, he's not. He's a spirit soul.
Yes.
The point of it is,
yes,
the thing was, yes, they have smaller brains, but Krishna can empower an animal brain to act like a human brain. We're just reading about Hanuman. We have it all over the place. So the idea is that it's obviously a transcendental blessing given by the Lord, so that because Bharata was so advanced. He had to go through the punishment of being the deer, but the question is, what was he going to do in that? Was he just going to surrender to his deer nature? No, he held on to his advancement. It was so great. It was at Bhava stage. And whatever he could do with that deer body, he did remember, and he didn't further his entanglement, and he hung out with the devotee in the ashram. And then when he left that body, Jada Bharata, because Krishna can do anything. What's impossible? So it's unusual, but it's not inconceivable. That's the best I can do, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.